like I haven't met. If you're going to go out there and build a partnership with government, academia, and community, there's a risk that you're not going to find what you want to find. So I think that if everybody comes to the table and saying, yeah, we want to make good public policy decisions, as much as possible. I mean, obviously I'm a political scientist. I know ideology plays a role in decision making. I understand that political partisanship plays a role in decision making. But when you're at the level of civil service, deputy ministers, community groups, and academia, we try to think that we're able to, through knowledge and through research, convince them that there are better ways or more efficient ways of aspiring to the same social goals. We have a database. I'll probably try to finish with that later on this morning. And that's sort of the first tool that we've had, and it's had a great response. We're up to about 250 researchers, government policy people, or community groups that are within our database in French and English. And what's really cool about our database is that it's not perfect yet, but you sort of check off what your interests are: literacy, adult education, poverty, official languages. And it's going to be making matches, and I'll show you a bit how that works a little later on. So if you're within government and you need an academic on poverty, well, we hope that the database will at least be a first step for you to go look through. Okay, filter somebody who's interested in social economic development, poverty, and some names should start to pop out. Obviously, we're a small province. There's some links that are already there, but obviously, like I said earlier, government does not know well the capacity that its universities have, and vice versa. I think academia hasn't looked sufficiently in the needs of government and public policy decision-making process. So it's a pretty simple database. It's administered, self-administered, so that's going to be a challenge for us. Make sure people keep their publications, their CVs up to date. You know how databases remain a challenge for all groups. So this is the structure. We've organized it, as I said earlier, around really three groups: informed communities of researchers, academics, and practitioners, citizens. So informed communities essentially are community groups. They can be individuals or groups. Academics is university research. Sectoral experts can also be the private sector. I haven't spoken about it, but like we have private companies that do polling or public opinion. Well, they're interested in the network also, and they've registered in our database. Practitioners and citizens. So it can be collective, but you can also be just an individual who's interested in poverty, and you can sign into the database and sort of keep up with what's being done. Consumers, they can be policy analysts, government, nonprofit sector, even media. I mean, we had an editorial board meeting with our provincial paper last week, the Telegraph Journal, and I was surprised. They were fascinated by the concept. I'll talk about it a little later. Within the framework of government cuts, even the level of interest with us has become even higher. Now, we don't want to be the filter of what gets cut or not, but government, all of a sudden, the idea that evidence-based decisions have to be made is even stronger. And what we realized as we were doing an editorial board meeting is that they saw us as an even more important group, useful for everybody. But again, I don't think we want to be the filter of decisions on budgetary cuts. It's going to be a challenge, actually, quite frankly. So it's controlled access through pins, as I was saying earlier. You participate. There'll be chat groups around subjects. You know how these forums work. So we sort of build, bonjour. Some of our arguments is also built around the idea of politics of transformation. This really basic concept that's sometimes hard to convince. We just had an election in New Brunswick, so the whole partisan stuff has been in high gear. That good policy can be good politics. And that's what we're trying to convince government, that political action, political capacity can equate or can also meet good policy. Good politics is good policy. And that has, again, in the conjuncture that we're in now, where governments really need to identify what is essential. Anyway, in New Brunswick and Atlantic Canada, I assume it's the same thing in other provinces. Good policies, good politics. Governments that base their decision on evidence are better positioned to engage the public with policy initiatives, increasing the potential for support. And I haven't spoken much about engaging people, but obviously we saw the election for the mayor of Calgary just last night. If you watch TV like I did, you're a political nerd. You watched the mayor say that essentially through social media, through really targeted meetings, he was able to engage. That was really where he put his victory. I don't know the inside politics of the Calgary area, but for him, the idea of engaging the public, and as you know, this has also changed in the last 30 years. Our first government that, ça va, oui, long time no see. Our first government that walked down the road of public consultation was Frank McKenna. We'd be in the late 80s. You guys maybe have gone through the same things in your provinces where all of a sudden government is opening the door a bit by consulting, so it's very one-way sort of system. And anybody who's gone to maybe a session this week on engagement knows that this concept has flourished all over the world. OECD has research on this, United Nations, etc., that the future of politics will be very different than this top-down 1940s, 50s system, and even much different than the Frank McKenna, we're going to consult you unidirectionally. So we hope that if we build this bridge between academia, government, and community, we're also pushing these actors down the road of engagement. But I would tell you that in New Brunswick, it's touch and go depending on the issue. Obviously, partisan politics comes in, ideology comes in, but there's a critical mass there that if you can convince people that bringing the citizens to be part of the decision, that everybody wins in the end, including public policy, including good politics. Community development is very important for us. Obviously, I'm from that sector, and a lot of our members that jumped on early on our research network were community groups also. We think that even, I said earlier that even within governments, there's not a lot of talking, horizontal discussion. Well, even within community groups. I mean, to be quite frank, very blunt with you, like I said, I presented my presentation in French thinking that maybe this was going to be a full-on bilingual presentation. So after seeing that the coalition has a member, which is la Fédération de la Communication Numérique, and they work very well together, I'm not talking about a divisive relationship. I'm just saying there's a lot of complexities on the ground also within community groups. So imagine in New Brunswick you have regions, you have urban-rural, you have French-English. These people are not always at the same table, and again, we don't pretend to be the magic bullet for everybody, but at least we're bringing these groups to and quite frankly, we're doing a forum next week. It's my last slide. I shouldn't be talking about this earlier. We're doing a forum next week, and it's a bilingual forum, and maybe being from the Francophone community, it's maybe easier for me to assert this, but I think that the language groups have worked, and not always in a collaborative, and sufficiently in a collaborative way. Now, there's a language issue. So Francophone groups want to function in French, and they should. It's a very important element to maintain a vitality of language and culture. And for English groups, it's not an issue of vitality of language and culture, but it's just the operating language of the majority of New Brunswick. I think that we need to build bridges there. And the point I want to make is when we were sending invitations, I took care of the Francophone groups, and the first question was, is this a French conference? This is going to be in French. You know, it could kind of be a trivial issue for you, but for them, if you dig down a little deeper, I've been in that group for 20 years, it also meant that, is this our community organization? Is it a forum where our community will be? And the answer is yes, your community is going to be there. There's going to be translation. There's going to be challenges. It's not going to be perfect, but we have simultaneous translation. So trying to bring these two groups together, and honestly, I think that we can learn from each other. And another group that I haven't even mentioned are Aboriginals in Atlantic Canada, First Nations, New Brunswick, Atlantic Canada, on issues of culture and language. I've always thought that they could learn much more from the Acadians and Francophones, and we have almost no partnerships with Aboriginals and First Nation groups, very little. We have these celebrations, little moments, 400th anniversary of the foundation of Acadie in 2004, where we have these little moments where our groups touch and communicate, but unfortunately, it doesn't last very long. So we want to build on what's there. Obviously, we don't want to duplicate, but honestly, there was nothing out there like us. We're really, I think there's a lot of curiosity around us. I mean, just the fact that our provincial paper wants to do an editorial board meeting with a bunch of academics was kind of weird, but I think it's because there's curiosity in, what is that? A network of academics and community groups and government. It's kind of a weird beast. So we want to build on what's there. We don't want to duplicate. And we think that long-term, New Brunswick is a winner, or in your case, in your province, if you want to go down this road, we have better decisions. And I addressed the issue a little earlier. I think we're coming up to really tough times. Anybody here who's following literacy or education or healthcare knows that the federal transfers are coming up for renewal in 2013, 2014. What's going to happen there? Well, we can just imagine that it's going to be tougher. It won't be easier. Will there be more resources? I don't think so. So, don't want to be doom and gloom this morning, but if at least au préalable, beforehand, we could have brought these partners together and talked about what's important, what's the evidence out there, what's research telling us. And this is an example I've given, and without going on either side, trying to stay neutral on French immersion in New Brunswick, we saw government take a position based on a research group of 2-3 people. They consulted this research group, and I think they're willing to recognize, I have spoken to the minister since, there was a whole National Center of Excellence on French second language within New Brunswick that wasn't talked to, wasn't looked at. So was it just because government ignored? Was it ideology? I mean, obviously it's a multifaceted problematic, but we're trying to at least bring these people together for when decisions are made on health, on education, on literacy. And literacy is a big issue. I'm sorry if I didn't speak enough about literacy, but I was a little reassured by the expertise that we've had in the last 3 years on that issue. But I think what I'm presenting here is overarching, but it also definitely includes literacy. It's a major issue in New Brunswick. The new government, David Alward, Progressive Conservative, is starting actually before Christmas an engagement process on learning. Learning being, again, catchword for early childhood to post-secondary. It covers all that base, and it's going to be a priority for them. It's a priority because I won't be throwing the numbers, but it's a crisis, I think, literacy in New Brunswick. For Francophones, it definitely is. Again, I'm not the expert. There might be experts in the room, but I mean, in some counties, my family's from Kent County, southeastern New Brunswick, on the Atlantic Ocean, Detroit, Northumberland. We're in the high 50s on literacy levels, so just 1 in 2, if I'm not mistaken, not able to decipher information and en faire du sens, avoir toute l'information, have all the information that is given, whether it's in a paper, a book, etc. So, I mean, that's a crisis, and it won't be political this morning, but governments have not sincerely addressed this issue. But I'm sure there's people in the room who can talk about how it's been a labor market sort of reasoning. We're doing literacy based on retraining, putting these people back at work, but it's way more complex and way more complicated than that. Social innovation that might be a little strong, or we might be showing off a little bit here, but we think that the idea of a research network between these partners is an opportunity for flexibility, innovation. It brings in, obviously, these policy people within government. I mean, on CO2 emissions, the province of New Brunswick had to develop a policy to respect the reduction, the numbers it had put on the table for reducing CO2 emissions. Well, the deputy minister has an MBA. The 3 deputy ministers had training in completely unrelated issues, and they had to make decisions on reducing CO2 emissions. And this is an example government gave to us. I'm not trying to point fingers. So they're recognizing that they don't have that